you won, there was like a rumor going around. There was like a short list of guys they were thinking about giving the belt to. Is that true? Do you know who else was on that list? And how did you find out you were going to win the title from Flair?
That is true. There was a list of 5 names. They told me a few weeks before. They said they got a list with 5 names and you're on it. And I remember it's like I didn't believe any of it because I'd heard so much, so many things like that over the years that I was going to get a big push or they were going to do this with me or they're going to do that with me. And most of the time it never ever happened. And somehow I got bypassed all the time. And so when I heard that, it was kind of like, I can remember rolling my eyes. I didn't even believe it. I was like, yeah, like that's going to really happen. And funny enough, we had a trip to Europe, and I remember I had changed my ticket to stay over an extra day on that trip just before this is just prior to me winning the title. And then we got a memo just before we left on that trip that we weren't allowed to change our tickets, and if we did, we'd get this big, huge fine for changing our flight. And so I went to Vince. I said, I didn't know about this memo, and I already changed my ticket. I'm already staying an extra day, and I'm coming home a day after the tour. And Vince was pretty good about it. He said, I don't think it'll be a problem or something like that. And I remember once I got home from that trip to Europe, I was on the road. My first day on the road was, I believe, was Red Deer, Alberta, which is like about an hour and a half from my house, which is, by WWE standards, is close. And so I went to the town, and they gave me a message that night, basically the first day back, that to catch the very first flight in the morning, that I was booked on a 6 o'clock flight to Saskatoon, and that not to change my ticket, and to go straight to the building, and that I was going to meet Vince McMahon, and he wanted to talk to me. And I remember thinking, it's about that ticket change. I totally missed what they had said about the list of 5, and I can't tell you who was on that list other than I know Bob Backlund was on the list, and I know a lot of guys wanted Bob Backlund to win the title. And the only other, I don't know, I can't remember now all the other names on the list, but I know that they said I was one of the 5. And so when I went to I caught the flight. I flew into Saskatoon, went straight to the building, and they told me to wait. I was at the end of a really long hall, and Vince's office, at the temporary office, was in the middle of the hallway, and it was a long hallway, like the length of the whole arena, and they told me to wait, that he was seeing somebody else first, talking to somebody, and I didn't know. I never did get it till I went in the room. But I remember Ric Flair came out of Vince's office, and I could see him. He turned right and walked all the way down the hall. And Vince looked left and waved at me to come up to my end of the hall, all the way up to his office. And I can remember taking this slow walk up there, and I never connected at all that I might be winning the title. That thought just wasn't real to me. And I walked in, and Vince told me to take a seat, and he started to talk to me about, he goes, we put the tag belts on you a couple of times, we put the Intercontinental belt on you a couple of times, and we've done everything that we can think of to do with you. And I remember as he was talking, I thought, this guy's gonna fire me. I really thought he was going to fire me, and I remember I stiffened up. I was about ready to tell him, I was going to say something to him, like, go to hell or something. I remember getting really tense and thinking, because they had my dad flying in that day into Saskatoon. It was part of the TV. We were doing a TV taping that day, and my dad was billed as going to be in my corner in a tag match. I think it was me and Davey against somebody, and I thought, they're going to fire me the same day they're flying my dad up to be in my corner, and I just was like, I remember kind of having my teeth clenched and waiting for this. And Vince was, he goes, we did everything we could think of we're going to do, so I don't think there's much we can do. What else we can do? So we're going to put the belt on you tonight, the big belt. And I remember I didn't even react. I just was like, okay. And Vince basically said, aren't you going to have any kind of reaction. He goes, everyone I ever said that to has always like been really jumped up for joy kind of thing. And I would have, part of me was jumping up for joy, but the real truth was I didn't believe it. I was like waiting for the hook, we were going to put the belt on you, but it never anyway. So I totally stone-faced Vince and said, after he said, like, I shook his hand, I said, thanks for giving me the chance or something like that. And I walked out of the office and I didn't give him any big reaction. But it was a big moment for me. And, the match itself with Rick, I too much I get remembered for criticizing Rick. But I think over the years I've realized that actually I think that what happened with me and Ric Flair was mostly a clash of eras. His era was just prior to mine. I was in just a slightly upgraded era from Ric Flair's era, and Rick was kind of more of a throwback to the Harley races and the old style wrestling, and of the top guys like Ric Flair they often did the same match every night, mostly because they had a different opponent every night, and they just had Rick had a great sort of match worked out. And I think when he was world champion and defending the belt, different belts that he was always, working with the top guys, and he always did the same matches, kind of routine matches. But I came from a different era. The era I came from, I think, was more connected to Dynamite Kid and a lot of the guys that worked in Calgary, where we had, we didn't do the big business that they did in the Carolinas at the time, and so we had to work harder to get reactions. And I was one of the new style wrestlers that was being a little more creative. And I can remember watching wrestling matches and thinking everybody did the same thing. Like if you watch one match, it was very similar to the next one and the next one after that. And I always thought, you got to throw in some left curves once in a while. Throw in things that people don't expect, and don't let people always be able to predict what the next move is going to be. And if they think I'm going to get thrown in the turnbuckle, I'm going to try to do something else, anything but get thrown in the turnbuckle. I'll reverse, or I'll do this, or I'll jump up and dive off the second rope, or there's a lot of things. I just was always trying to think of new ways to do the same kind of things that were being done. And so I think a lot of my criticisms of Rick back then are not necessarily fair now, because I've come to realize that the same kind of things could be said about my wrestling now by the guys that have passed me. But I just think it was a different era, and I've always been really grateful now looking back on the matches I had with Rick. We had some great matches, including that one. I will say that that was one of the hardest matches I ever had, in the sense that somewhere in that match, right in the beginning, I was working Rick's arm or something like that, and he told me to climb up on the first. I climbed up on the first rope and stood on it. Somehow, the logic was that somehow this put more pressure on his arm, which I'm not sure how that worked. But he kept telling me to climb up on the first rope, and then I would tweak his arm kind of thing, and he would sell it like crazy. And I remember it got a reaction. But anyway, when I did it, he pulled me off the second rope or the first rope without me sort of being prepared. And when I came off the rope, I rolled my ankle. I almost broke my ankle, and I really hurt my ankle really bad. And I was limping through the match for real. And I was in a lot of pain all the way through the match. And a few minutes later, he had me going for a figure four, and he kicked me off, which was standard, except for he kicked me off and I fell backwards into the ropes. This is all in the match if you ever watch it, but I fell back in the ropes, and I broke my finger. I dislocated my finger. It was actually sitting sideways like this. And if you ever watch it, I'm looking at my hand going, holy And I remember if you watch the wrestling match, you can see me actually snap my finger back into place. And you can see Kurt Hennig go like this. He goes, ah. And I remember thinking, you think that hurts? It hurts a lot. And then, anyway, so when I won the title that night, I went straight to the emergency in Saskatoon at the hospital. And I spent the night celebrating, instead of celebrating my big title win, I remember I crawled into bed about 3 a.m. and my hand all taped up, and there wasn't much they could do for a dislocated finger or a sprained ankle. And that was the start of my champion run. And I turn around as I set the last 2 little shots down. Jim picked Vince up. And I remember Hulk Hogan looking at me like, are you gonna do it, or do I gotta find somebody else to do it? And I was like, then I just looked at Hulk Hogan and looked at Hawk, and I just took off and clothesline Vince full blast.